Thank you, Reverend Angie, for that meditation. Our speaker today has traveled many miles to be here today, and she relives them just about every day, especially when she's going to be talking. I introduce you today to Rev Wynelle Waters.
Reverend David, that was great. And Angie, thank you for that lovely meditation.
You're welcome.
And for the healers. Yeah. Okay, so I'm starting. And my topic today is the teaching or the meaning of wealth. Or, our phrase is happy, healthy, wealthy, and wise. So I looked it up in 2 or 3 different dictionaries, and you got the same thing, physical, tangible, resources, gold, money, riches. And I thought, okay. And so then it would get on to things like affluent, prosperous. And I thought, yeah, like you have a wealth of knowledge, so that's another way. But it was really about this money thing. And I thought about it because I'm raised in America. And America means you make money. I mean, that depends on your social status, depends on your ability to have power. It's almost like we have given ourselves to something outside of ourselves, which is money. And that's, you do well. I mean, there's a progression that you're supposed to do. And the prize is you're wealthy. You get to be Jeff, what is his name? Bezos, Amazon guy, whatever. So I thought, this can't be it. And I thought of my own life. And I thought, I had 3 husbands who all made money. I mean, one was the controller of an oil company, one was the vice president of marketing, and the last one was an attorney. And I did too, because I worked the whole time and I had my own business. I sent my child to private school. We vacationed in the Dutch Antilles and, Hawaii, and we had a maid and a yard man in 1920 Tudor house, a Victorian in New Orleans, and blah, blah, blah. And so by the time, I don't know, had I turned 40, not quite, I had it. And I was not happy. I mean, when I divorced the first husband, I got up every morning crying. And what was wrong? 26 years old, living in this beautiful 1920 Tudor with a solarium and 18 windows. And so what? And so I thought, I must be different than everybody else. I don't know. So my last husband, he and I went to a business workshop together. And the way it worked is it was a weekend once a month for 9 months. And the guy was named Marshall Thurber. And his draw was integrity in business. So we went. There were about 70 people. And I learned a whole lot because he had a lot of metaphysicals. He had worked with Buckminster Fuller, and he had a lot to say. And I really did. But the thing I remembered the most was either the first weekend or I think it was the first weekend we were there. And he said, I want everybody to close your eyes, and I want you to visualize you looking at yourself, your face, in the mirror. So we all got real quiet. We did it. Okay, and then he said, I want you to see yourself having everything you want. You got the Tesla, the BMW, whatever. You got $5 million in the bank account, $25 million in property, blah, 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 blah. Okay, and now I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to look at yourself in the mirror. And we all looked at ourselves in the mirror. He said, so how does it feel? Nobody said anything. And finally, this one guy said, I don't feel any different. And he said, that's right. Because money cannot allow you, or how was it? Money doesn't make you know you. That's what he said. And I thought, oh, well, that's kind of different. Okay, so fast forward. I'm not happy. Guess what happens? I get sick. Isn't that the thing? Happiness, health. Well, I have wealth, but now I'm sick and I'm not happy. And so I sell the business, and I decided, the husband should make it right, and if they don't, you can just always divorce them. And so that was the thing for me. And I mean, when people say you never talk about your marriages, I think, no, they were nice people. I mean, we didn't have trouble with drugs or alcohol or beating. They were nice. I only wanted to make them be perfect because I couldn't do anything with myself. And when they fell short, I went to therapy and sent them to therapy. Oh, it was just a mess. So anyway, I divorced the last husband. My therapist said, "Don't do it, Wynelle." Said, just all because. And I said, well, and I'm sick, and I didn't like what any of the doctors said. One said I had cancer, and I got so tired of the doctors. So I started doing all this New Age stuff, and I had a wonderful Chinese acupuncturist that just came over from China, and he would, well, now you don't understand. You're female. I said, that's my problem? And he said, I said, you just tell me, you're female. I said, you mean I'm going? He says, no, you're stuck on picture. You're watching a movie. The movie goes on, but you're stuck right there. And I went, and then first man who ever put a needle here, an electric charge went through me, and the flu and everything that they said too, then I was dying of, went boom, and after that I had a sniffle. And when it happened, he said, oh good, it worked. And so, there must be something here. And so then when I sold the business, I didn't sell it for a lot, but I didn't have to work. And so for 3 years, I did nothing but metaphysical workshops. I learned to be a massage therapist, a rebirther. I think I taught Qigong. I was doing aerobics. And then I got into going to Aspen and being in a tent for 4 days where you did express and release work. It went on and on. And I went to a massage school run by a gay sexologist in Berkeley because I met him in the 4 days in Aspen while we were screaming. And so it was the era. It was the 80s. It was what they sometimes call the New Age circus. And it was like, it's got to be there. It's got to be there. It's got to be there. And I did learn a lot. Believe you me, I did. But out of the 3 years, guess what? I didn't have any money. I had $5,000 to my name. My child, thank God, didn't want to go to college. And everybody said, it's because of you. And then her father, who could do it, he was the son of a butcher who couldn't read or write and a mother that worked in the textile mill, and he wanted her to go because that was going to save it. But I worked my way through school, so you should too. So I said, okay, Amanda, I'm leaving. And I said, you have she was working, she had her own apartment. Here's $2,500. So I went with $2,500 in hand, and I said, I'm going to take the great mythological journey, within self. And it'll probably take me 4 weeks, and my goal is Seattle. Okay? Now, I can't stand rain, so why I decided to make Seattle my goal, I have no idea. So I did it. I had a great boyfriend. He was a rock and roll guitar player. He asked me to marry him. He gave me a ring. And after a year, he said, you're not really going to marry me, are you? And I said, I don't think that's my answer, to have a fourth husband. And so he went on, and he married somebody else. Oh, what a heartbreak. And I decided to take the grand journey. And so it started out with a bang. I knew how to tent, I knew how to do all this stuff. Marvin and I had done a lot of that. And so the first night I was in Mississippi, and it was mud because they had rained. Okay, so I couldn't put out my little tent, and I only had $2,500. So I slept on a picnic bench in the middle of Mississippi, off some highway. Now, Mississippi is known for being notorious in the South. I mean, you may have visions of it. We really did. And so, but I did it, the next day. And then I got to my grandmother's house, and she, I packed some stuff there. And finally, after, she had went with me and got my car looked at, like a grandmother would do. And finally, after 10 days, and I was still washing my car one more time, she came out, and Mima looked at me, and she said, honey, today's the day. And I said, what do you mean? She said, today is the day you leave. And I go, Mimo. Not today. I mean, I could do that, and she wouldn't look at me in the face. And I think I'm going to write stories about that, but this is one. And this is a self-made woman who didn't graduate from high school and ended up being the first woman executive in an insurance company. And she was tough, and she had husbands. And she hugged me and she said, "Well, now I don't understand why you're doing this trip, but I understand that you have to do it." And I just went, nobody else was saying that. And she said, "So, if you leave before 11, you'll get to El Paso before the rain comes." Because she was in Dallas, Texas. I'm like, wow. And I cried like a baby. Like I never knew how to make money. Like I had a baby that died. I mean, it was like I was reduced to 12 years old again. And I got in the car and she's waving. So I camped in El Paso with foxes. There were foxes in the camp. And I continued. And then I had a tooth that fell out. And first I went to Portal. There is magic in Portal, Arizona, which is east of the Chiricahuas, almost at the new. And Portal is what it is. I mean, Harry Potter talks about going into a portal. And I camped there for 2 weeks. And I sort of got my bearings as to what I was going and ready to leave to go. I was going to go to Sedona and all that again. And a filling fell out of my tooth, and I went to this little town called Tucson, Arizona. Went to the best dentist I'd ever been to. She fixed 2 teeth, and she charged me $75. And she's not here anymore, which is too bad. But so, anyway, and I went on, and I kept traveling. I kept doing stuff, and I would get to places. And, of course, I'd have to sleep out on BLM land because some of the motels were $40. If you do that a while, you don't have $2,500. And so eventually, I got to, after I'd gone to see where Evel Knievel jumped the Snake River in Idaho, and things were happening along the way that was really interesting. Like I got there was a young guy on a motorcycle, and, I was 44 or something. I could have been his mother. And he said, "Do you want me to take you to the place?" And I said, "Yeah." So I got on the back of his motorcycle. He showed me the place, the angle, the whole thing, and then he took me back. And nothing ever happened to me. Like when a man would say, "Go down to end the road, there's a lady who takes in people." I would, and there would be a lady who takes in people. And it was like, I got to thinking, something's with me, okay? So I got to Olympia, Washington, which is below Seattle. It's the capital. And people had told me when I did a Native American women's group, we did moon circles, all this. Everybody gave me names. Now, when you're traveling with somebody, you won't call these names because you ain't. So if you're by yourself and you think about it, this was 93. There were no cell phones. I had a roll of quarters. And I called somebody. If they weren't there, I just had to call them back another day. And so I got to Olympia, and I was standing there, and I said, "What am I going to do? I have $12. And I thought, I've been on the road for 5 months, or I can't remember, 5 months. And I've seen some amazing thing. I've, reconnected with roommates, and it was great. And of course, everybody's keeping me, too. That would help. And then they wouldn't, and then I'd have to stay in the motels for a day. And so I had $12, and I thought the hostel will always take you, and I can't camp in a city. So I'll find out if there's a hostel, and it'll be $10, and I'll do something about it tomorrow. And so I saw this lady, and I said, "Can you tell me where the hostel is?" And she looked at me up and down, and she said, "Honey, the women's shelter is right over there." And I mean, it hit me like a load of bricks. I mean, what was I going to say? You don't understand. I used to have a business, and I used to, it's like, who cared? So I remember Ram Dass's book about be here now. Okay. Because I have to backtrack a moment. And all of this stuff, when I was doing all this Ram Dass came to town. And it had, and I sat on the third row, man, I was into it. And the only thing I really knew about him was the LSD thing. When he was a clinical psychologist at Harvard, his name was Richard Alpert, Dr. Richard Alpert, and he connected with Dr. Timothy Leary, and they started doing experiments with psychology and hallucinogenics and LSD, and people were dropping acid like crazy. And they decided to take it to the School of Divinity and do it on all of the divinity students to see if that would give them a peak of life, more. Well, he got real disgusted because it didn't. He didn't feel any more spirit. He didn't get any of his spiritual things, but Harvard fired him for doing it. And so he went to India, he got a guru, and he was renamed Ramdas, Servant of God. So I'd seen the business guru, and so now I was going to see a spiritual guru. And he was sitting in his seat, and when you came in, and he just started talking, I've been reading in the news about this cocaine epidemic, and he was right. In the 80s, people were losing their business. It was amazing what all was going on with cocaine. And he said, I'm especially into these cocaine babies because people are addicted and then their children are. And he said, you can understand it at the bottom because they have no hope. They don't have a way to eat or survive, or they've been born in squalor, and it gives them some sense of happiness. And he said, but the thing that's amazing is the statistics are higher at the high end. There are more cocaine babies who are coming from families of 1 million or more than this. And he said, and how can this be? They have done the American dream. They have done what they've told all of us to do, to work, to do this, and they're not happy. And he just sat there, and he said, and you know why? Because they don't know who in the hell they are. And he said, they don't know themselves. So I kept this in mind when I was out there. I'm going to find myself. So that day in Olympia, I thought, man, this is all going downhill. I can't keep doing this. I'm not going to go to the women's shelter. I said, so what are you going to do? So I called the ex-boyfriend, Marvin, and it was 2 days, and I said, how are things going there? Maybe I should come back. And he said, well, I've really found somebody who wants to get married. You don't. Okay, bye. So then I had a credit card. It was maxed. And it was only $1,500. So I thought, what am I going to do? So I went to the cheap part of town where they had motels for $20, maybe $22. And so I went there, and I thought, God help me. This one looks the most decent and I thought maybe if nothing else, he'll take the $12. So I went there, and I put out the credit card, and it worked. I don't know why. I don't know how. It had been stopped, as far as I knew, and it worked. And I cried all night, and I called a friend of a friend. And he called me, and he said, listen, Wynelle, I'm so glad you called. He used to come hear Marvin play, and he said, you want to get together, like tomorrow? And I said, yeah. And he said, oh, and listen, do you have a place to stay? I have a 4-bedroom house. Why don't you come stay with me? And I went, what? Yeah. So I showed up. I mean, it was hilarious. He said, okay, Gary, I'm a Democrat. You're a Republican, and we laughed. And so he said, you just stay with me till you get things worked out. The next day, I got 2 jobs waitressing. I hadn't waitressed in 25 years. And it was the era of lattes. It was first coming out. There was these little kiosks called Starbucks. And I thought, oh, God, $2 for a cup of coffee. So I was in this one restaurant. I couldn't make a latte to save myself. They wouldn't work. So somebody came in. The woman liked me because I talked to her about her dead husband or something. And so she just get people to make lattes for me. And it just went on. Customers at the other, we're going out of town. Why don't you house sit for us for 3 months? So I stayed there until I made about, $700. And I finally had to pay for somebody. Somebody was going to charge me $7 a day. That's $210. And my caveat was, well, if I go camping, on the peninsula up there. Something. Do I have to pay? Oh, no, you don't have to do that. And so I lived with this lady and this was after my house setting, and I never will forget this one. I was in between waitressing, and I came back, and I was in the room, and I just cried. What am I doing, God? Where is this supposed to be me? Blah, blah, blah. And so Joanne Sell was her name, and she was this is my beautiful room. It has satin this, and you can't put anything in the closet, and you can't do this, and basically my suitcase was on the room, was on the floor for a month because nothing could be touched. And at night she watched police stories, and then she talked about that rotten Dell that left her. Well, Dell left her 18 years ago, and it would be like, what am I doing? So I'm crying. She comes home for lunch, and she starts pounding on that door. She said, open that door right now. And I thought, oh my God, she thinks I'm going after, I'm on the satin bedspread or whatever. I opened the door. She came right in and she said, come here, Wynelle. And she put her arms around me like my grandmother. And she said, honey, I don't understand what you're doing. She said the same thing my grandmother did. But she said, you're the toughest young girl I've ever known. And whether you believe it or not, I admire you. And you're going to make it. And don't think for one day you're not. And I thought, it was like God speaking to me. So I left and I made the rest of the trip. But what began to happen to me is I began to trust myself. And the thing that was happening, that people were opening up for me that never knew me. They didn't know that I had done blah, 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 blah. They just saw me, and I was okay. And so I felt like at one point I was playing volleyball with a group of people, and I thought, I'm the happiest I've been. And I'm not even paying rent. And it's like, how did this happen? So I worked my way around, and I thought I would go back to I would go back to Tucson. I was coming back to Tucson. And I ended up in San Diego, and I saw the ocean. And on my trip, I had gone to the Berkeley Psychic Institute at Berkeley, and there was a one there. And so I saw the sunset in Del Mar, and I said, oh, I could do this. I didn't know how much money everything was. And I went to the Berkeley Psychic Institute. I found it. And they turned around, and Debbie Kanmayas, my first teacher, said, you made it. We kept seeing you coming. And we didn't know it was going to be yesterday or today. You made it. Wynelle, come back at 4 o'clock for the first class. She didn't say, do you have money to do it? So called a friend of a friend, my ex-husband's ex-massage therapist. And she said, yeah, I'm writing a book. Come on, why don't you come here till you figure out what you're going to do? And thus began my 12 years in San Diego. But the point I'm making is I learned that there was something in me that could do it. It wasn't out there. And I could do it without hardly anything. So the other day, I'm thinking about all this, and I went, that's it. Wealth is an inside job. It's not this out here. And so I went back to the dictionary. And the main word that wealth and wealthy comes from is the word welfare. It's the Old English in the wealth. Well, in our society, welfare means, you can't take care of yourself. But it meant originally welfare, that you're happy, you're healthy, and you have good well-being. You're prosperous. It had nothing to do with money. And that was the root word for wealthy and for wealth, was welfare. And then it went back to the Welsh, which used to be farewell. And so when they would say, God be with you, and farewell, they would mean farewell. Do well with whatever you're doing and prosper. And I went, well, this makes sense. And I went, that's it. It's an inside job. And the thing that's so wonderful about it is we're born with it. You didn't come in this place with anything. You came with just you. You're going to leave with just you. I mean, the Egyptians believed you could take it all with you. And maybe they could, because they don't talk about the empty tombs. Maybe they made it out of the sarcophagus or whatever. But it's like you've been given your own bank account. And it's like, it's in here. And when you go in there, you get in touch with all that is in you. And we say it right here, all knowing which art within us. That means everything. God or the divine or whatever is bigger, is limitless. It's in you. We don't even have to ask it to come in. It lives here. We breathe. See all this? You can't touch it. You can't feel it, but it's air. And if we don't breathe this, we'll die. So breath is in us all the time. Breath is alive. It is life. We never, no matter how separate we try to get from the divine, it is with us always. And I got part of that in Egypt. When you would go into a temple, the center of the temple was the heart. And it was not as big as this room. It was about the size of your library. And that's where the temple, that's where the heart of the temple was. And they built that little building first. And then everything went out from it. And I thought, that's it. We have this, we have the heart, we have ourself, we have our soul. I couldn't find my way back to me. And so the most important thing it is, I believe, is to be you. You know, to be Michael Waters, to be Charnay, to be Angie, to be David Miller. It's like, because that's what you were made to do. You were set up to do. I love the quotation by Joseph Campbell. He said, if you find yourself on the path and you see it all laid out in front of you, just like I did with that trip, it took me about 4 weeks, I got enough money. And he says, it's not your path. It's probably somebody else's, because you make your path every step of the way. And that's terrific. And he also said, when something happens in your life and you stumble, where you stumble is where the treasure is. So you've got to allow yourself to move from the inside out. Because this, I can tell you, in my experience, ain't going to do it. It'll get you closer. But it's like I told Angie and David before I started the speech, I said, maybe I should have been a Buddhist right off the bat and just meditated all the time. But it's like, because, Ram Dass became a Hindu and then became a Buddhist. And then he went back to his Jewish tradition because he was Jewish. And he said, it's all of it. And we're never separate. And I really do believe this. I am that I am the light of the living God. And therefore, I am free. And I am all-knowing. And I am worthy. And I leave that with you. Thank you.
Thank you.